Rishi Sunak's new electoral strategy involves sucking up to motorists. He seems to believe that blocking local councils from installing speed limits will unite the Tory base, both in the home counties and the Red Wall. But what if some in the north of the country have other priorities? High-speed rail, for example. Well, that was put to him by a host at BBC Radio Manchester, and he didn't handle it well.
We're straight talking people in the north. It's a yes or a no. Are you scrapping the HS2 line between Birmingham and Manchester?
Now, like I said, I'm not speculating on future things. We've got spades in the ground right now and we're getting on. But what people also want to know... government is always making sure that we get value for money out of everything we do, but that's just a statement of the obvious, right? But I think what people also should know, because I know there's a lot of focus on this one thing, but actually, what are the journeys that people use most in Greater Manchester or across the north? It's in their cars right now, getting to work, taking their kids to school, making sure that the roads are free of potholes. That's probably priority number one that people raise with me.
We're not talking about potholes. The main story right now across the country is people want to know about the future of HS2, and still now you can't give me a yes or a no, and you're the man in control. You have the keys. You can tell us now if that's happening.
But Anna, my point to you is the vast majority of the journeys that people make are in their cars, making sure that we make sure our roads are well maintained.
But we're talking about trains. We're not talking about cars.
You could see the exasperation in her face. If you're listening on the podcast, you could also hear it in her voice, of course. Aaron, watching that, I mean, he's going to get slaughtered at the next election, isn't he? Of course, government cares about cost management, but that's just to state the obvious. It's like you're trying to be talking to the audience at home. What the hell are you doing?
Yeah, I'm the Prime Minister. I couldn't possibly tell you anything about the future of what the government intends to do. I mean, that's just an extraordinary assertion, isn't it? I'm the Prime Minister. You're the one person out of 16 million people in this country. You're the one person who should definitely be able to answer that question. Okay? You know, if somebody's in the cabinet, maybe you'd let them off. But the Prime Minister, you've been given a mandate, not you personally, but your party in 2019 of 80 people, precisely because you can answer that question, but you can't. I mean, it's really basically, it's translation for saying, sack me. I'm a useless Prime Minister. And of course, the reason why he was so evasive, Michael, is because the Tories have their conference over the next week in Manchester. And it is supremely stupid from a public relations perspective to be doing what it seems they're about to do, which is effectively declare that the HS2 leg going to Manchester from Birmingham will be potentially cancelled. I mean, to announce that before your own conference in Manchester, not suicidal, but it's pretty damn close, doing something very counterproductive to your own interests. Of course, one has to suspect that if it was good news, if they were to say, no, this leg will most certainly stay, they would therefore be shouting it from the rooftops because the conference itself will be in Manchester. Perhaps we're all being played. Perhaps there'll be a great act of political drama and Rishi will talk about the Manchester connection and the new station in Manchester, Piccadilly or whatever, come 2035, or whenever the hell this is going to be finished, probably 2135 at this rate. It is really interesting, isn't it, Michael, how it's local journalists on the BBC, generally speaking, who hold politicians the most accountable. We saw it, of course, with the Johnson government too. We've seen it time after time as well. I think Liz Truss had her run-ins with local journalists as they do these media rounds. Far more accountability coming from people in Manchester, Leeds, Birmingham, the Southwest, than from journalists at Westminster. And I think that really goes back to the point that I've said so many times, Michael. We have no accountability and scrutiny when it comes to politics and political journalism in this country because they're all friends. Andrew Marr, for so long, political editor at the BBC, had his own show on the Sundays. He had a novel. Where was the launch of that novel he wrote? It was in Number 10 Downing Street, hosted by David Cameron. That is a favour you do for a friend. That is not something you do to somebody or for somebody whose job is to hold you accountable. Very strange. So I think the fact we're seeing this kind of accountability coming from local journalists, very revealing, confirms and compounds something we've seen previously. And look, if you're a betting person, surely this means that the Manchester leg is either going to be dramatically delayed or cancelled. I mean, if I had to, like I said, if I was a betting man, I think it would be delayed to the extent that it's basically being cancelled. It's a bit like their pledge to net zero, We're sticking by net zero, but we're not going to do anything which means we can reach net zero. The analogy I used the day that Sunak gave that speech was to say, we're still having a Christmas dinner. Everybody's welcome on December the 25th, but we're not buying any food. Okay, well, you're not making Christmas dinner, are you? So I think we're basically seeing a similar strategy potentially with the HS2 leg from Birmingham to Manchester.
While Sunak may have gone cold on HS2, not everyone has. Andy Haldane is a former chief economist at the Bank of England. He said this to Channel 4 this week.
On the specifics of HS2, that is a crucially important, totemic, I would say, symbol of levelling up in practice. If I had my way, we'd be talking not about HS2 being thin-sliced, but about HS3, HS4 and HS5. We said in the report that by unlocking the potential in UK cities, you could earn yourself an extra £100 billion. That's each year. Each year, Helia, which stands comparison with the £100 billion you mentioned for HS2 as a one-off cost, right? Compare the two. Of course, that's an investment worth making. It's a price worth paying.
I think build the whole of HS2. Build all the legs, take it up to Scotland, build Northern Powerhouse Rail. Why can France have high-speed rail? Why can Spain have high-speed rail and we can't? It just seems completely ridiculous. If the problem is it's got too expensive, then let's look at why high-speed rail is more expensive in Britain than it is elsewhere. Let's not just dump the high-speed rail. And I think the other thing that points to is sort of the idiocy of the way this country has been run, whereby constantly what you're trying to do is cut costs and not thinking about investing in the future, right? Because it might be expensive now, but if it pays off in the long term, then it's worth doing. Now he's saying that's exactly what HS2 will do. I think you could apply that to so many things, including like our kids' education fundamentally. Aaron, it's kind of refreshing, wasn't it, to see sort of someone say HS2, HS3, HS4, someone say, let's just goddamn build some stuff.
To quote Mao Zedong, let 1,000 HS2s bloom, Michael. It was refreshing and also strange coming from somebody who's associated with the National Central Bank. Often those are the people who talk about fiscal prudence and don't spend any money and all that hocus pocus. It's entirely true. There was an argument that's put forward by Peter Hitchens with typical contrarian panache. He said, we don't need HS2, we need low speed one. Because apparently we're a small country, we can just have more slow trains. He basically wanted to reverse the closures of Beeching's Axe with regards to the destruction and dismantling really of the train network we had before the 1960s. And I don't think that's entirely wrong. I think we should reopen some of those for sure. Somewhere like, for instance, Brecon, I don't think it has a train station, right? Or somewhere like Gosport near where I live, I don't think it has a train station. It's also incredibly hard to get to by car. You've basically made somewhere unlivable, frankly. If somebody wants to live there and work elsewhere, impossible. They have to drive, and it's a bloody horrible drive. So I think we do probably need a mix of low speed one and HS2. It is depressing, Michael, because the argument that's made again by people like Peter Hitchens is that we're a small country, we don't need high speed trains. Well, Italy is a similar sized country, and it has high speed rail going between its major cities. And we should really be talking about HS2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What about the high speed connection that connects, say, Plymouth, Exeter, Bournemouth, Southampton, Portsmouth, Brighton, Hastings, Canterbury? Game changer for the South Coast. Game changer. If we were a sensible country, that's the conversation we'd be having. Not whether or not we should be connecting Manchester to Birmingham, our third largest city by GDP, to our second largest city by GDP. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. And I was asked this question. I went on GB News, and they were asking, with Peter Hitchens, should we build this? And I'm saying, look, I'm a socialist, but you have to look at this from the perspective of investment and private enterprise. As Haldane said there, you're looking to invest in a city. Okay. You're looking at places like Lille, Bilbao, Valencia, Turin, Milan. I could go on. Strasbourg, Krakow. They all have very good infrastructure. They all have very good rail connections. They all have lots of educated young people. They all have actually fantastic urban environments, right? Now, if you're looking at Bilbao or you're looking at Toulouse, and then you're looking at Manchester, of course, rail access and the ability to get from there to other places is hugely important. I'll finish with this, Michael. The Tories want to build a free port in Liverpool. Okay, they're obsessed with free ports. Now, of course, it's a port. Stuff will enter the UK via a port and it will go elsewhere. But they don't want to have a high-speed connection between Liverpool and Manchester, this enormous city right next to it, or Liverpool and London. I find it absolutely mind-bending, mind-numbing, frankly, after 13 years to the people, that the Tories say, yep, we want to build a port, you'll be able to invest there, we can trade. But then you got to get on Thomas the Tank Engine and go 2 miles an hour if you want to go to, half a dozen places where those goods might want to get rather quickly. Crazy. They're not serious about building an infrastructure for a 21st century country. Yes, of course, this has gone overboard in terms of cost. Originally we were seeing 30 billion for the whole project, including Manchester, and of course to Leeds. I think that was including the original sum, Michael. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. Now it's 100 billion plus without some of the aspects that were originally included. Of course, that's a problem. That's an argument to address costs, not to ditch the whole thing. It's a matter of time, I think, before we get people who are from the construction industry or chartered surveyors saying, I want to go into politics because I know how to keep costs down when it comes to big infrastructure projects. Some people do, by the way. It's just we don't have many of them in public life in this country. I think emblematic here, Michael, is for our parliament to refurbish and renovate the Houses of Parliament is going to cost, if we're going the full Monty, £20 billion. £20 billion. 1% of UK GDP to renovate the Houses of Parliament. 1% of the entire economy and its output for 1 year to renovate one building, frankly, right? SpaceX put Starlink in the air for, I think, $12 billion. So you're basically saying that to renovate one building in central London, one building, costs approximately twice as much as it costs to build a space-based internet that the whole world can access. Like maybe I'm stupid, but that sounds ridiculous. So obviously we need to get on top of costs and procurement in this country. Obviously, we have to do that. We also have to build a high-speed rail network connecting our great cities.
Aaron, if I was watching this and I was your ideological enemy, I would say Aaron Bastani, fully automated luxury communist, has just made the argument for private enterprise over and above state investment. Elon Musk can send Starlink into space for 20 billion quid. The government can't organise to repair its own house for less than 20 billion quid. How would you respond? Have you just disproved your own book thesis?
Well, actually, they're strikingly similar in many ways. So, for instance, SpaceX, which isn't a public limited company, it's a private company, which is just crazy. It's a private company. SpaceX, they build that project off the back of public investment, particularly NASA contracts or contracts with various nation states to get satellites into the air. SpaceX does not exist originally without US taxpayer money. And so what that shows you is actually public-private partnership, and I don't mean in the Blairite sense, but NASA, for instance, with the moon landings, which was a similar one, or World War II, Spitfires were used by the RAF, but they were built by Supermarine, which is a private enterprise. You can do mission-oriented projects using both the state and private enterprise. And that, I would say that was what Starlink is, right? The American state doesn't let that go on unless the CIA's got a backdoor into it, but that's for another conversation. I think instead, Michael, I think these turn out to be highly efficient when it's public investments, like with the technologies behind the iPhones, developed primarily by US defense agencies. When it's public investments which are being then marketized and commodified to make money for private individuals, incredibly efficient. But when we leave these things to politicians to enact public goods for the people, incredibly inefficient. There's two sort of big explanations for me why here. One is consultants. Fake job, right? A great book on this by Mariana Mazzucato about consultancy. Fake job. It's not a real job. All of that stuff, almost all of that should be done by civil servants. Almost all of it. You can see some value in what consultants do, but actually they slow down processes. They add very little value. They take a hell of a lot of cash. And even as we've seen in Australia recently, I think it was with McKinsey, they were even divulging state secrets to people that then went on to make money. So consultants are one part of the problem. And then another part of this, Michael, is, Trump was saying, I will build a wall. I'm a property guy. I'm really good at building stuff. For people who are acquainted with decades of the state being crap at doing stuff, that's a really alluring message. I know that the liberal media loves to paint, US voters who voted for Trump in 2016 as stupid morons. But that message of I can build stuff and get value for you is clearly good. I mean, if only we had somebody saying that in this country and actually meant it rather than a charlatan like Trump. And then finally, the state has often got very good value for money in the past, Michael. When we had, again, World War II, when you have Messerschmitts and Stukas flying over the English Channel, nobody said, leave it to the market. Leave it to the market. They said we need the state to get involved to coordinate production to achieve something really quickly, really efficiently that private enterprise can't do. The same with the moon landing, the same with Sputnik, the same with regards to distributing the COVID vaccine in recent years. So the state can do tremendous things at scale very efficiently. The NHS, another one. The NHS is much more efficient than the United States private healthcare service. It can do things very efficiently, but we need the right people in charge, and we need to have confidence in the civil service and state capacity to do things, rather than saying, let's have consultants, let's have, crazy. With regards to HS2 as well, of course, there is the added aspect of NIMBYs and having to build tunnels to appease people and build this and build that, because you're trying to please various stakeholders who still don't want to build it anyway. But I think you're right in regards to Parliament costing 20 billion. Extraordinary. I'd say let's have a public inquiry. It won't do anything. I think, frankly, this is why I like PR. We need more people, more parties in politics to expose these kinds of failings and offer different kinds of solutions.